Hi everyone, I'm Melanie of Art Studio 320. Welcome or welcome back if you've been here before. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment and press that red button and ring the bell if you would like to be notified every time I post a new video. Today is the follow-up on the video I did on the coffee table with the bleed through, with the primer and the wood filler. I'm going to go through the whole process of fixing that in this video. I think that you can learn from this and hopefully avoid the pitfalls that I experienced. And that's what it's all about. I'm here to make the mistakes, the screw-ups, so that I can learn and pass it on to you. Stay tuned. As you can see, there were multiple bleed through spots where I had put primer over the bleed through that was the wood filler. And on top of that, there were water spots from the daffodils I'd put on there for the staging. So I had some problems I needed to solve. If you haven't seen the video on my coffee table, you can go to my channel and click on the thumbnail that you see above. The first thing I had to do was scuff up that polyurethane I just put on. So I took my 60 grit sand block and then my 240 sandpaper with my sander and cleaned it off with a tack cloth. After consulting with my new friend Karen at Designs by Karen on Instagram, she suggested I use Bin Primer by Zinsser. She said in her experience, it covers every kind of stain and bleed through. Be sure to check the description box for all of the materials I use today and links for Design by Karen. As a general practice, I always paint with the grain, no matter whether it's primer or paint. I put 2 coats of the primer on and sanded in between. Today I am using Fusion Milk Paint, which is very similar to Chateau. I just was out of the Chateau interiors and the milk paint from Fusion had just come in the mail. The measurements were the same, 1:1, 1 of the powder and 1 water. And the extra bond, which was by Chateau Interiors, it was 2:1. So 1 of the bond and 2 of the powder. The directions on the Fusion paint were very clear. Use gloves and a respirator to be sure you're not breathing in any of the dust. My goal here is to get as close to the color I already have on the table as possible. But the colors are slightly different, but I'm pretty good at mixing. So I'm taking the velvet palm that I ordered and the toasted coconut. Each package is 1.7 ounces, and I ended up using all of both. I think the trick to using the powdered paint is your mixing. I shook and shook and shook. First mixing the powders together since I was mixing 2 colors together, and then mixing with a whisk and shaking in a mason jar. There is definitely a technique to this, an art, if you will, and I think that it takes practice and time. So if you're in a hurry to paint a piece of furniture and you want it now, I wouldn't recommend using this for your first try. However, the colors are beautiful, and if you do have the time to practice and learn how to use these, I highly recommend them. They're small companies and they need your support. I measured out 4 ounces of water in my mason jar and added my 2 mixtures of colors, which measured out 4 ounces as well. I like to use a funnel whenever I can just so you don't lose any of that precious commodity you're working with. I'm mixing the powder into the water a little bit at a time to be sure that it's dissolving as I go along. I should point out that the directions do say use a blender, but I didn't have a blender I could use for paint, so I used a whisk. And if you can use a blender, go for it. I'm thinking right about now that the color is getting pretty darn close to what I was using before. So I'm going to add just a little more of the toasted coconut that I put aside and equal parts of water just to see if I can lighten it up just a bit more. Now it's time for the extra bond, and remember, it's 2 parts powder to 1 part extra bond. Extra bond is to keep the paint from chipping, because a lot of people use this paint because they want to distress it. But on this piece, I want it nice and slick and clean. It's finally the moment of truth where I'm going to open up that mason jar and put in my square brush by Zibra and put on the paint. I won't spend a lot of time showing you painting the underside of the coffee table because it's really the top that we're focusing on. I don't know if you can see, but this is the new color, and it's a little bright for what I wanted for this table. There are not a lot of things I claim to be really good at, but actually mixing paint is one of those things. And when I realized that I had used everything I could use, I added more of the toasted coconut, and I still wasn't getting the color I wanted. So now I'm going Gotham gray. And I already put 1/8 of a cup of water in there. And now, I'm supposed to use a mask here, so I'm going to put in the mask in. Powder's in there. I'm going to shake it up. This is what it looks like. It's a little smokier, which is kind of what I want. I'm going to let this sit for about 10 minutes so it can dissolve a little bit more, and then I'll shake it up some more. That's better. Once I wiped the top off with the tack cloth, I was ready to paint the top with the roller this time. Then I gave the top a quick sanding with my 220 block sander. After the first coat with the roller, I started to notice some weird things going on. Well, I don't know if I want to call them issues or if this is just the way it is. Yeah, right here. it's kind of, I don't want to say chunky, but there's pieces. It's really rough here. What happens when I sand it? I was thinking that perhaps it was little pieces of pigment that hadn't dissolved. It was very odd because when I sanded it, it turned white, like right here. There were quite a few areas like this all around the table, so I needed to think about how I was going to fix that. Here's a big spot. I already sanded it though. It was really chunky. When I did it, I couldn't see it. This time, I decided to use a brush and just be very focused on how the color was coming out on the table, making sure that everything had been dissolved. And there were some really weird things, like some red spots, and just that's how color is. So I just mixed it together. You may even be able to see that there is a bit of a yellow tint to the paint. And as it sat around more in my tray, this is what happens. I really had to mix and mix and mix again. After the second round or the second coat with the brush, I still was finding some rather rough spots that were just really weird. I wanted it to be smooth, and there shouldn't have been any reason why it wouldn't be. But again, when I started to sand, I was getting these white spots, like I was revealing these chunks of pigment, and perhaps it was the toasted coconut that hadn't dissolved. I'm not quite sure. I even used some steel wool, thinking that maybe that would be a softer touch, and perhaps it was, but in the end, I decided to go back over the whole thing and just touch up those areas that were the problem. So what you see me doing is using my 220 block sander and just going around the table and feeling out the areas that were really rough and just gently sanding it. And then my plan was to just go back over those areas, not the whole table, but just those specific areas with the paintbrush again to touch it up. I decided after using the 220 block sander that I would get out my Bosch with the 240 grit and really sand it down nice and smooth. Use my triangle brush, my Zibra. There. After all that sanding and getting it ready, I wiped it with a Tack Cloth, and then I painted just the areas that seemed to be the problem. And it actually worked quite well. I was finally ready to reapply the polyurethane. I used the Minwax extra flat, and I put 3 coats on. And believe it or not, I solved the problems. Yay! I can sum this project up in 2 words: determination and patience. Well, that's all I have for you today. I know it was a short one, but I hope that it was informative, and my best advice to you is just go ahead and try things. Watch my videos. I'll help you through it. I'm new to this game, so everything I'm doing, I'm showing you. you know, warts and all, that's how you learn, and I want to help you learn through me. So I hope that you will take away my mistakes and learn from them, avoid them in your next project. Thanks for being here. See you next time.